Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martorano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Hi, everybody. Welcome again to the Behavioral Corner. It's me, Steve Martorano. This is what I do. It's a great gig. I hang on the corner. It's a conceit, I agree. And wait for interesting people to come by and talk to us about their life, their work, because this is a podcast about everything. Everything affects our behavioral health. It's all made possible by our underwriting partners, Retreat Behavioral Health. You'll hear more about them a little bit later. If you're following along at home, wherever your podcasts are kept, and you've heard us in the past, you know that many times we visit the issue of art in our lives and what the effect it has. Obviously, a big factor in our mental and spiritual and often physical well-being. Art's important. And we've talked to all kinds of people, painters, sculptors. We've had writers on, and lots of musicians and people in the music business, because I had a little background in that myself, so I know some folks. And we return to the issue of music, because it is so much a part of our lives today. You know, a lot's been written and read about music. One of my favorite quotes, and one of the oldest ones, I guess, is that music hath charms to soothe the savage breast. It's a very old, it's often misquoted, but that's the quote. And I know our guest agrees that there is a lot to be said for soothing the savage breast through music. Shannon Curtis is a singer-songwriter. She's currently on tour in support of her latest album, Good to Me, and she's squeezing us in on that tour. Shannon, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
Are you familiar with that quote?
I feel like I've maybe heard a misquoted version of it because it sounded familiar, but not quite what I've heard in the past.
It's always the savage beast, and it's not the savage, it's the savage breast.
Interesting.
And that's a fancy way of saying, you know, life, as a matter of fact, which can be a savage in an unfortunate way. I heard Shannon do an interview locally a couple of weeks ago, and in talking about her art and what informs it, I said she's got to come on the corner, because she's talking about the stuff that's important to us. She's only doing it through music. So let's do a little bit of the background stuff for folks who might not know who you are. You are living in Tacoma, Washington. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Stockton, California, in the Central Valley, California. Went to college in San Francisco, lived some time after college in the Central Valley, Sacramento area, that kind of thing. Went through a big life change in my late 20s, early 30s, including a divorce and just a massive shift in my life, entering 12-step recovery. We were talking about that off the air a moment ago. It was part of that time. And I moved to Los Angeles for a decade. And about 5.5 years ago, my now husband and I moved to Tacoma, Washington, and we love it. The Pacific Northwest is mwah.
I know your husband's name is Jamie.
Yes, Jamie Hill.
Jamie Hill. He's your producer as well, right?
Yep, we are partners in crime in everything that we do. And
Well, that's a nice lifestyle right there. Did you grow up in a musical family?
I grew up. I took piano lessons starting the age of 4. Classical piano. I took 14 years of classical piano lessons, so I was trained that way. I also grew up in the church. So there's lots of opportunities for young people to sing in church. So church is no longer part of my life and my experience, but that is definitely a place where I got a lot of music background.
And do you remember? Well, I'm sure you do. The first song you ever wrote?
I do. It was for my church, actually. I was a teenager. My sister and I put to music a couple of psalms. And it was actually a really encouraging experience, because we took it to our the choir director at our church and said, "What do you think of our little song?" And he said, "I love it." And he printed it out on sheet music and taught it to the congregation. Like they sung that song for years that I wrote as like a 16-year-old, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, you know, people, you can't minimize something like that happening to a young person. It can be very, very inspiring for somebody. You must have thought, wow.
I was not expecting that at all. I felt very encouraged and like, okay, maybe I can do something like this. This is cool.
Right. Well, and when was the first time you stood up and sang for your supper?
Oh gosh, I guess that was probably when I was in my first band in my early 20s after college. I was in a rock band, and yeah, we did a lot of touring around the country, playing college campuses, and man, the big learning curve there, getting the experience of what is it like to write songs and record music and perform. Like
Hmm.
those were cutting teeth days. It was great.
Uh, well, so you're a veteran in the music business. You don't come by this accidentally. Um, how many albums altogether now as a solo artist?
Okay. Well, 10, I've recorded and released 10 studio albums every year for the last decade. So that's the bulk of it. Prior to that, I released a few EPs here and there as a solo artist. But when you're singing for your supper, you've got to stay busy. You got to stay on the road. And my husband Jamie and I did um, for the last 10 years, pretty much exclusively house concert touring. We've
Hmm.
done over 600 concerts in people's living rooms and backyards. And so we would go out on tour every summer, and we would want a new album of songs to share,
Sure.
new stories to tell, new, all that stuff. So we were on this wheel of, producing and getting new music out every year.
If for people who might not be familiar with living room concerts, how does that work? Do they pass the hat? Or how does it work?
We kind of invented our own model for doing
Hmm.
these. In fact, we wrote a book that became an Amazon Music Business bestseller book back in 2014 about how we started doing all of this, because so many artists were asking me, "How are you doing this?"
Hmm.
And so we would do it. But these are not the people who would host our shows are not house concert hosts. So, and there is a large network of house concert
Right.
hosts all over the country. We were not doing that circuit. We were connecting with the people who follow the music that we make, and turning them into house concert hosts. So we would help them create the event. They would invite their friends, neighbors, colleagues, whatever, and we would create, a new little market of people to play for. And we would do we it was donation based. It was not a suggested donation. It was an open donation always, because it was really always a value of ours that anyone who wanted to come to experience an art event could do that. I don't think that art, or really any pleasurable thing in our world, should be saved only for people who can afford to pay for it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so it was really a value of ours to make it so that anyone could come. And so we just asked people at the end of the show to donate what they wanted to for the experience.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I know. I know. There's the last topic we did like this was someone I've known in the Philadelphia area for 4 decades now, who has done this basically for 40 years.
Mm.
Bars, restaurants, back porches, uh, gazebos in this town square, and then I mean it's the purest essence of what a it's the troubadour. It's the bard that goes from village to village,
Yeah.
carrying the culture with them. So it seems to me that your living room situation was an effort to not merely get your music out in front of an audience that might be sympathetic towards it, but make sure they understood what you were about, the things that were important to you that shaped the music, right?
Absolutely. Yes. And I mean, it was such a great vehicle for connecting to humans,
Yeah.
like there's that intimate environment. I had so many experiences where, I'd get done performing for an hour, sharing my stories, my experiences, and my songs. And that's an act of vulnerability, right? To open yourself up like that. And especially in that kind of an intimate environment where there's not like a stage separating you from the audience. And I had experiences night after night after night of people lining up at the merch table at the end of the night to buy t-shirts and things like that, but also to get a moment to talk to me and share with me something about themselves that they needed to share with somebody. And I was that person, even though we were practically strangers. Opening the door with sharing my own stuff kind of gave them an opportunity and an invitation to share a little bit of themselves too. And gosh, it's just art is such a powerful force for forging those kinds of connections between people.
Now that connection metaphor is important. completing that loop from the performer to the audience is really what it should be about. And by the way, playing in front of 25 people in their backyard takes more guts, in my opinion, than in front of 100,000 in a baseball stadium with rockets going off and big screens and all of that. I mean, I could probably do that. Anyway, I could probably do it. Shannon, just one other sort of biographical background. Who were your influences? And I'm going to say I don't think you would be put off if I said that Kate Bush must have been one of them.
Oh, I adore her. Yeah, she's wonderful. I have been gaining new influences even in my 40s. I feel like I'm discovering new folks all the time. She's a big influence. When I was first starting to write music, the female songwriters of the time that were really influential were people like Sarah McLachlan and Fiona Apple and Tori Amos. These women were out there just doing really bold, raw stuff that was highly influential to me as well. But sonically, I harken back to the stuff that I listened to as a kid in the 80s on the radio, the Depeche Mode and, Pet Shop Boys and things like that. Sure. So it's been fun to pull in some of those influences too.
You're moving into that old guy yelling at the crowd where he has a lot of good music now, but when I was young.
Oh yeah, I get off my lawn, I'm definitely in that phase.
Okay, I know that all too well. So let's talk about what you propose with this music. What I know that from my reading that you mentioned, and I'll give it the direct quote: reclaiming serenity and agency in a stressful time. Explain that for us.
Yeah. So I want to give you the background to this album. I started writing it in January of 2021. And you remember January of 2021?
Vaguely. I read about it. It was in all the papers.
It's going to be in the history books too. It was the sort of what felt like the thick of a really stressful time. The year 2020, we saw the arrival of the coronavirus pandemic and all the shutdowns and all of the just daily abuse that we were getting from our leadership, surrounding all of that. And then the election and all the stuff that was, I worked as a volunteer for, I live in Washington State, but my husband and I volunteered online for the elections in Wisconsin because we felt like we needed to do something, to try to affect some change. But in my spirit, at the end of 2020, the beginning of 2021, it was 2022 when I started writing the record. I'm sorry, I'm getting my years mixed up. But the point is that I was in a space sort of in my spirit where I was super stressed out. Like I wasn't sleeping well. I was spending a lot of my days feeling really angry and unsettled. And I was getting enough cues that I needed to get my act together. I needed to do something to change the state of being that I was in. I felt like I was so powerless in the face of so many, crazy things going on in the world. And I wasn't feeling at peace in my spirit. And it occurred to me that I have a set of tools that I have had at my fingertips for the past 18 years that I first encountered in 12-step recovery, that can help me get back to that centered place. And so I decided it was time for me to dive back into some of those concepts. And what I did was I sort of took myself through a very sort of measured practice through concepts of the Serenity prayer, which is a big concept in 12-step recovery. We say it at the beginning of every meeting, and for those of you who are not familiar, the saying goes God, and God is, whatever you need for it to be. I have a complicated history with religion, so I don't particularly love the word God, but in my imagination, it means a power greater than myself. But God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Mm-hmm. And I took myself through sort of a step-by-step set of journal prompts that I gave to myself from these concepts. And and began with just freeform journaling. The journaling then became each of the 10 songs on the record, Good to Me, as an offering to folks who listen to my music, just to say, hey, I've been struggling. I've been out of touch with my own peace and my own power in my life. Here's some stuff that I'm doing to work through that. Maybe you're in that spot too. And maybe I can hold my hand out and say, let's go on this journey together.
And that album is called Good to Me. And it's the one you're out touring to support. And I will tell you, having listened to a handful of the songs and heard you talk about it, I'm not here to flatter, but it is one of the rare musical efforts I've heard in my lifetime. Not that it's immediately autobiographical, but it's one of the best expressions I've heard from an artist. Okay, here's what I'm going through. This is what I'm feeling. And it's in your music. I mean, my idol is Bob Dylan, and Dylan has given due notice that, Blood on the Tracks took place during a terrible time in his life and marriage. And it was as raw and as beautiful an expression of where he was. It's hard to tell where he was when he wrote Desolation Row, but we know where he was in Blood on the Tracks. And your album echoed it resonated for me that way. I went, she didn't just write a song because it made her feel good. She wrote a song because she was feeling bad, and maybe this would help her feel better. So it's just a wonderful purpose to have when you're gifted, and you have a gift for being able to do this. Why not put it to work to sort of relieve the stress, a very stressful period in everybody's lives. Talk a little bit about something else you mentioned that I'm utterly fascinated with, and that is, in a very stressful world, the political world is stressful, the culture is stressful, trying to keep up with everybody. Oh, look, they're in Italy again, everything, politics, and of course the 900-pound gorilla in the room is the environment. I mean, we are on the precipice of a disaster. No one seems to be doing anything about that. As you say, makes for a stressful existence. You talk about radical acceptance. Okay, I think I know what radical means. What are we accepting there radically?
So when I was walking through the step of acceptance in my journaling, I had to actually do some reading about this, because there's a big, huge part of me that did not want to accept, because I'm like, no, it's not okay. All the stuff that's going wrong isn't okay. I can't just accept it. And I was so grateful to have found some resources, particularly from folks who study and write about Buddhism, and the idea about acceptance doesn't have acceptance is not the same thing as approval. That those are two different things. And it was a very interesting concept to me, and one that was new really to me. The idea of acceptance is just the idea of essentially being with what is. And when I try to fight the reality of what just is, like, and I give this example in the show that we're touring right now. So let's say it's raining. Like, obviously it's and I would rather it were sunny. Like, it's obviously stupid for me to try to go to battle with the weather. I can't, right? I have to accept the fact that it's raining. Okay, that's an easy one. Let's move to a little harder one. So something truly terrible happened, and I wish I could go back. We spend so much time sometimes thinking, I wish I could go back and try to do something to prevent that horrible thing that happened. The choice is acceptance, because the past is the past, and we can't time travel back there, right?
Let me interrupt. And in that context, it doesn't involve, when you say accepting what you can't change, it doesn't suggest resignation, does it?
No, not at all. See, because what I've learned is that then the act of acceptance is just, okay, this is what is. This is the reality of what's happened. Climate change and the fact of, powers that be not doing anything about it, that is what's happening. Like, my railing against reality causes me suffering. But if I can get to a place where I'm accepting that this is how it is, then I have space in my spirit to turn toward, okay, how do I feel about it? Like, I can feel all that I feel about what is. Like, but if I can then focus on what are these feelings telling me about what my values are or what I need in this situation, then I can access my power and what are my choices, what can I actually do to move forward, and try to be part of some change in the world or in my life that's going to move me/us in the right direction. Just the act of acceptance really just opens up for me the opportunity to have just the clarity and the opportunity to be able to see where I do have the power to act. And that is everything.
To free yourself from a sort of immobilized sense of helplessness. So in your case, you can first recycle, use the same bag going back and forth to the market, but you also have some skills and talents that you can use. And that's why I find it fascinating talking to you about what you're doing. You're not just writing songs, but you're writing songs that come out of that real deep place. You talk about uncertainty in many of the songs on Good to Me. One that struck me was, or a couple that did, but from the inside out, you talk about uncertainty. And we had a show on that very recently about something that economists are now calling radical uncertainty. It has to do with an economic model. If you can't imagine what the uncertain factors will be, it'd be hard to figure out how to fix your economy. So they call it radical uncertainty. What happens when radical acceptance meets radical uncertainty?
I kind of, when you mentioned that, I kind of thought, my first thought was, I think it's the same thing. Like, I think that sitting in uncertainty, to truly sit with the truth of uncertainty is an act of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, so much of, and this is how I tend to deal with things. When things feel uncertain, my knee-jerk reaction is to want to try to make things certain, to try to control things or set things up in such a way that I can predict what's going to come, or, but really that's impossible, right? Like, the only way forward without getting yourself all wrapped around the axle with worry and all that kind of stuff is to just accept. And so when you mentioned radical uncertainty, I'm like, I don't know that I think that the antidote to that is radical acceptance. Like, I think that it's always going to be uncertain. So we're constantly invited to sit in the space of accepting that we don't know what comes next.
Yeah, it's an odd concept when you think about it, because something cannot be uncertain until it happens. You know what I mean? You can't.
That was uncertain.
Gee, I didn't see that coming. Well, no kidding. If you did, it wouldn't have been an uncertainty. Right. So it is an odd concept, but it's an interesting application of the Serenity prayer. I'm going to do a show in 2 weeks on the Serenity prayer, where we bored down a little bit more on that, because there's the God thing that bothers a lot of people, and there are a couple of other issues regarding it that I'm fascinated by. But
can I say one more thing about the uncertainty concept? It just came to my mind as we were talking. I think also the concept of uncertainty invites us to a state of being fully present also, right? Because when we're grappling with what's uncertain, we're trying to imagine the future.
Uh-huh.
But in accepting uncertainty, I think it's an invitation to be fully present here and now.
Stay awake.
Yeah.
Stay alert and awake, because things are happening. And
to stay grounded here, because this is always when life's happening right now.
Right now. Shannon Curtis is our guest, singer-songwriter, on the road now. If you're hearing this anywhere near Burlington, Vermont, are you there tonight or tomorrow, this weekend?
Saturday the 16th.
Where at the Flynn, right?
At the Flynn. Mm-hmm.
Okay. We missed you, unfortunately, in the Philadelphia and the Delaware Valley area. You were in Phoenixville. You were lucky. They finally caught that guy that was running around loose.
He was in Phoenixville the same night we were.
He was. Couldn't get tickets, I understand. Anyway, her latest album is called Good to Me. I want to talk about Connections, which is an earlier album you had. But first, tell us how you distribute your records. You do it through something called Bandcamp. Tell us about Bandcamp. That's
one of the avenues. Bandcamp is the most artist-friendly music distribution service out there. They have always had an artist-first approach to their model. compared to all of the, the places where mostly people will listen on Spotify or Apple Music or, any of the other streaming music services that, don't pay anything really. I mean, like I could probably buy a sandwich on my next payout, like it's kind of pathetic.
And
But
not even a large sandwich, I'll bet.
So Bandcamp is great because it is they do have a streaming option, and some users do use the streaming option on Bandcamp. However, it's the community in Bandcamp of creators and listeners is all about supporting artists. And so as an artist, I can put my music up there and I can price it however I want to. The way that we've chosen to do it is to make everything a pay what you want model on Bandcamp. So you can come and download my entire catalog for nothing if you want to on Bandcamp, or you're given the option to pay what you want. And most people who download my music from Bandcamp do give what they can. And folks who can be are very generous, and folks who don't have as much to spend give what they can, and it seems to work out.
Yeah. So before I forget, people who want to hear your stuff and contribute to you for your good work, they can do that through Bandcamp, or it's on your website as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. ShannonCurtis.net is where I am.
.net, yeah. Connections. You did this 6-7 years ago. I saw your TED talk. It was fascinating. Very briefly, what was the intent of it? And tell us about your reaction to how people reacted to Connections.
Well, the intent of that album, I have been writing albums sort of on sort of as concept albums for a long time now. Each album sort of has a theme, and the theme has always been drawn from what I'm going through, what I'm processing as a human in this time on planet Earth. And at that time, I had just discovered the work of Dr. Brené Brown, and I was just fascinated by the ideas of how we make connection with other humans, and primarily with regard to how when we allow ourselves to be seen, that is just an open door for connection with other people, the kinds of connections that we need to survive and thrive in our lives. And so the very first song that we did for that album was a song called I Know, which is just about that idea. Like, hey, I know what you're going through because I've been there too. I may not know exactly what you're going through, but it's a song about just listening and seeing, like, yeah, I feel you. We made a video for that album, for that song, that we invited our community to submit little 10-second videos, short videos of them holding up a card with some struggle they had been through. And I didn't know what we were going to get. We got just dozens and dozens and dozens of submissions of people sharing that they had been through addiction, that they had been through eating disorders, that they had been through abuse, that they had been through, I mean, you name it. They shared so vulnerably for this video, and we stitched them all together as just an offering to the public, whoever would see it, to be like, look, whatever it is that you're going through, you are not alone.
Yeah.
Because that is the trick of our brains when we're going through something hard, or if we're somebody who deals with depression. Our brains trick us into thinking that we are the only one who has ever dealt with this.
Yeah, and we know we know a corollary to that is that substance abuse, for people who suffer from that, the oldest trick that has is that it tells you you're not sick when you are. Anyway, by the way, Connections. I saw the video. I saw the people's. It's heartbreaking. There's so much pain out there, and the willingness for them to put that card up and say, this is happening to me, was something to see. I'd urge anybody who wants to see that to check it out. It's up on your site, right? Yeah. Finally, because I know you're on the road. By the way, thanks so much for taking time out to do this. Can you just share one little quick story with me that I heard on the interview that I love so much? It had to do with an initiate on a train with his teacher.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably the best description of what the phrase "be here now" means. But tell us that story and we'll let you out of here.
Yeah, it was really moving for me too. So as I was going through my journaling for the album Good to Me, I was nearing the end of that journey and grappling with the idea of like, when and where does one access one's serenity, right? Like, do I have to go to a silent retreat to get it? Or and I had right around that same time stumbled across an interview that I saw that Trevor Noah did with a man named Jay Shetty. And he's a writer. He's got his book is called Think Like a Monk, I think is what it's called. But Jay Shetty trained to be a monk some years ago. And he was sharing the story about how when he was training to be a monk in India, he went on a train journey with his teacher. And they were going to be on this like 17-hour long train journey. When you're studying to be a monk, you don't buy the fanciest train ticket. You buy the least expensive train ticket. And so that meant they were in the car that was the most crowded with people, animals. It was smelly. It was loud. It was, pure chaos. And so on each stop on the trip, Jay would get off the train and find a quiet place to go meditate. And after several such stops, he said that his teacher stopped him and said, "Why do you keep getting off the train to meditate?" And he explained why, and the response that his teacher gave him was, "Do you think that life is like the stops, or is life like the train?" And I thought to myself, wow, that is exactly what I needed to hear, because, we certainly are marketed a lot of ideas about how we have to buy this or go do that to find peace. But the reality is that my peace is inside of me all of the time. And if I can use my tools that I have available to me to access it, I can do that on the smelly, noisy, dirty train. I can do that in the midst of the struggle. And in fact, I've got to be able to do that, because I take this one step further. Like, if I want to keep moving forward in my life and in my work, being involved with making this place where we all live something better than it is, leaving it better than I found, I got to stay on the train. Exactly.
Got to stay on the train.
There's no escape hatch, and so that was just a really powerful image for me.
It is. It's just a perfect metaphor. Someone online, I think he was a stand-up comic. He was very good. He said the thing about life is it happens every day. And I thought of your story about the train and the monk, and I thought, yeah, it does happen every day, and there are there are not a lot of stops along the road. Shannon Curtis, thanks so much. Good luck with the tour. With Good to Me. Everybody should look for where she's playing. Maybe she'll be I know she's going into the Midwest real soon. Check her out if she's in your neighborhood, and you can hear her music online now. Hope you'll come back again sometime when we can talk again.
I would love that.
Terrific. Thanks you all as well. Don't forget, the drill. Like us, follow us, critique us, whatever. Hit the subscription button. That doesn't hurt. We appreciate it here on The Corner. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. We offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.
That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.